Welcome everyone to episode 105 of Raw Sport. My name is Ahmed Al Houli. We are back with another big one. Today we're joined with a very special guest, a man very familiar in boxing circles around the world, the man, the legend, Billy the Kid Dib. Billy, welcome to the show, buddy. How you
Thank you,
going?
thank you so much for having me. I'm doing really well, thank you.
My utmost pleasure, my man. Billy, what's going on? Life after boxing?
Man, everything's good, man. I'm just really going with the flow and just enjoying, training a few kids and just enjoying the business world. I guess it's a transition from the boxing world to the business world is a whole different thing, isn't it?
Talk to us. What do you got going on in the business world?
Man, obviously, just the regular stuff. Just building a few properties and just trying to build the portfolio with with my mentors and stuff like that. And then obviously, I got some really exciting things going on with the WBC. Um, I'm working very closely with Mauricio Suleiman of the WBC and the WBC University to put together a program that's going to basically, give the fighters the platform that they need after boxing, because a lot of fighters unfortunately leave the sport of boxing broke with no money and no education and no fallback. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that they have that fallback. We don't want anybody leaving the sport of boxing, with nothing left in their life, nothing to do.
So that's breaking news, eh, Billy? Breaking news, new app being launched in collaboration with the WBC, Billy the Kid Dib, and
Yeah, so it's the WBC University. It's going to be also um, uh, this is going to be a worldwide app. It's the application is going to be called Boxwise, and it's about teaching fighters to basically not just be good fighters, but also be well educated as well. I think that's the missing part. That's the missing link, that a lot of fighters, all they know is boxing, and so if it doesn't work out for them, they've got no fallback. And so that's what we're trying to change that narrative to make sure that there is a fallback there, that an education takes place, and they can basically have a fallback if needed.
Billy, you had a successful career by all means, and you made some decent money in your career in boxing. You came at a good time. You had different figures in your life, former world champions, celebrities, all that, right?
Yeah.
What happened after you walked away from the sport that led you to sort of come to this moment of realization?
Well, to be honest, I was at a convention in 2003. I was at the 2003 convention, the WBC convention, and we were having a talk with Mauricio Suleiman about how sad it is that so many fighters leave the sport of boxing broke with no money. And he asked me, he said, "What do you suggest?" And I was like, "There's got to be something out there. Something better than what's happening. When you got great champions like Iran Barkley, Roberto Duran, all these greats who have got, basically just getting by. That's really, really sad, and to think that they invested so much money, into the sport of boxing. They gave back so much to the sport of boxing, and boxing made so much money from them. So what I suggested to Mauricio was coming up with with a platform that basically allows fighters, to invest some of their money. So, if I asked Mauricio Suleiman if there was a way that we could basically put a rule in place that, fighters have to invest a certain portion of their money or their purses into
A
a
fund?
long-term fund, or some sort of in Australia, we have this thing, right? It's called superannuation fund. In America, they don't have that, you know what I mean? So I was like, why don't we organize, to have a superannuation fund to look after the fighters' purses and their money. And, basically if a fighter blows his whole, you know, portfolio of property and money that he's earned on gambling or whatever, and then in the end he gets to that age of 60, and then all of a sudden he finds out that he's got a couple of $1 million stashed, and then that could definitely help him in the later stages of his life. I just feel that it's really, really important that, we make a decision to put an end to fighters leaving the sport of money, like sport of boxing broke with no money. It's terrible. I remember just last year being at the WBC convention, and Israel Vasquez passed away, and he didn't even have enough money to pay for a funeral. His family had no money to pay for a funeral. So the WBC was left to pick up that bill. So that's where my motivation comes in. To try to help fighters.
Wow, that's pretty sad.
Yeah.
Jeez. Wow. That
And this,
sort of
and you're talking about Israel Vasquez, somebody who was involved in one of the best boxing trilogies in the history of boxing against Rafael Marquez. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
how does a guy that went from being in them kind of fights and them kind of purses end up being broke? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Billy, you're a fighter up the top. When you're up the top, a lot of people start to love you.
Yeah,
When you drop, they disappear. The
yeah.
problem is the ones that love you take a lot from you.
Well, I mean that's the major problem that fighters have is that they're not only servicing their own lives and their own families, they're servicing their friends and people in their family who are doing it tough. Thinking that the paydays are never going to dry up, but they do dry up because the reality is that unless you're a big name like Canelo Alvarez, Manny Pacquiao, Oscar De La Hoya, i.e. them kind of names, when you lose, you fall back. So you're not really earning that kind of money anymore. And these guys spend money as though it's never going to run out, and that the big fights are never going to diminish, and they do, because there's always a young man who's knocking on your doorstep, who wants to take your title or who wants to take your position, and it's like if you don't, you got to be smart enough to make sure that yes, okay, I've just fought, I've earned $100,000. What's the smart choice here? Do I buy a car or do I buy a house? Do I buy jewelry or like you got to make everyone's trying to fake it till they make it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you got to make it before you fake it. You know what I mean? You got to make it. You got to stack them chips. You got to put that money away. You got to invest in property. You got to make sure that if something happens to you, if you're involved in a car accident or something goes wrong, that you're going to be okay. That you earn the kind of paydays that are going to make sure that, you know what, I put money aside for a rainy day. I'm going to be just fine.
But I remember when Andy Ruiz won his title
Yeah.
against AJ, he had a big crazy party or something that you only see in the movies. He was serving sushi on naked models, literally, like actual females.
Yeah.
So the extravagance is definitely there. That's that. I don't know what happens to fighters. I think because generally demographics of fighters is from lower socio-economic places. So when they finally make it, there's all this money that they're not used to.
Yeah.
Then the sharks start circling, and they don't help themselves because they start buying cars, jewelry, so on and so on. So it's a real problem with fighters.
Listen, let's be honest. Most fighters who succeed come from the backgrounds of poverty. I mean, they come from obscurity. They come from a working class family who's basically just getting by. And then all of a sudden, this young man has 10, 20, 30 million dollars in his account and thinks that, oh my God, I'm going to live it up. And I'm going to spoil all my friends and I'm going to be the man of the moment. And Andy Ruiz was a one-hit wonder. He won the title and lost it in his next fight. You know what I mean? You're a one-hit wonder. You know what I mean? At least stack some chips. You know what I mean? At least buy some property. Or maybe he did. Maybe, I don't know what he did. You know what I mean? But I did see the lavishness of the cars and the jewelry. And all of a sudden you see these guys, they've never wore a gold necklace in their life. Next thing they're wearing a gold necklace that's this thick. You know what I mean? Like, tone it down a little bit. It's like, look after your life, look after your family, look after making sure that if you finish boxing tomorrow, you're going to be okay. Because remember, you've invested your whole childhood, basically your whole adolescence, and then you've also invested, a large portion of your pro career into trying to get to this point where you're going to earn some serious money. And you do, and then all of a sudden, you forget that you've had to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to this point, and then you blow it because you get excited. You're like, oh my God, I'm on top, and you know what I mean?
Billy, can you break down for us what it is a fighter has to spend every single fight camp at the championship level?
Well, let me tell you, at the championship
in
level,
percentages, basically.
yeah,
If you don't have
I'll
figures.
tell you. Look, let's just work it out like this. You depending on the caliber of the fighter, you're going to need you're gonna definitely need to look after your trainer, which is anywhere from 10 to 15%. Then you got managers who are on 10 to 15%.
It's 30 gone.
Okay, and then you got you're paying people like a strength and conditioning trainer, a nutritionist. This is all expenses. You know what I mean? Nutritionist, all this stuff. You're forking out all this money. Let's bring it down a notch. Let's just say it's 10% to the trainer, 10% to the manager. Then you've got your partner who's called the ATO. That's your number one partner. That's your marriage partner for the rest of your life. So all of
Or
a
in the
sudden,
States, it's called Uncle Sam.
look, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Most fighters would be lucky to leave with 50% of what they earn.
Wow.
And then on top of that, what they do is, let's just say they earn $1 million. Okay? And a lot of these fighters don't realize that they got to pay their taxes at the end of the year. They spend the money. And
Yeah,
then
it's
all of a sudden
gone.
the ATO is chasing them for money.
Yeah.
Like, how's that even possible? How's your team? Who are the advisors that are around you? You know what I mean? Like, the number one thing that I would tell any young fighter, first and foremost, is that get yourself a mentor. Get yourself somebody that's going to look after your well-being. You know what I mean? Somebody that's going to have your well-being in the best place in their heart. You know what I mean? To see you succeed and see you put your money away. I was lucky. I had my career was basically looked after by family. So you're not going to get robbed. A lot of managers out there robbing their fighters. Taking advantage of their fighters, doing side deals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite sad, man. And that's just the reality of boxing. That's not going to change, because let's be honest, boxing is full of thugs and full of hooligans and full of but that's just the way boxing is loved. Boxing is loved the way it
Yeah.
is. You're not gonna. Turkey O'Shake is coming in and doing some great things for the sport. In some ways, and in other ways, it's not so great because he's giving out really big purses, and all these fighters are basically now trying to protect the next fight because they're saying that if I win this fight, then I'm going to get paid this in the next fight. So they don't fight hard. They don't put their body on the line. They don't make them like they used to make these great fighters back in the day, man. Like the Arturo Gaddis, the Mickey Wards, the old school fighters, man, like the
We'll,
Chavezes, the Durans, and
Billy, we'll definitely get into that because I want to talk to you about the whole Times Square and so on and so on.
yeah.
But before that, so there's an app that's going to be launched. Is there going to be a fund that goes with the app?
At the moment, we're just working on it. It's all work in process at the moment, and I can tell you that in December of this year, I will be going to the WBC convention, and I will be basically pitching it, and hopefully, it's going to be mandated by Mauricio Suleiman and the WBC that every fighter who's rated within the WBC will need to be aligned to this application.
There you go. And then hopefully future, like what's the end goal here? Like what would be
The end
the
goal is
perfect
not,
system?
the end goal is not just to support boxing. The end goal is not just to support the WBC, but we at the WBC with Mauricio Suleiman would love to see the IBF come on board, the WBA, the WBO, all of the sanctioning bodies, and not just that. Worldwide, a lot of athletes worldwide have these phenomenal careers and leave the sport that they chose with no money.
I mean, we're seeing Manny Pacquiao coming back at 46, and there's a man who's made hundreds of millions of dollars.
Something's going on.
Yeah, something's
Something's going
not
on.
right.
It
Yeah.
can't be just about legacy.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And then the other thing is that, when you're talking about Australian sports, rugby league players, so many of them have illustrious careers, do great things, win premierships, playing all these amazing games, and in the end, they've got nothing to show for it.
NFL,
Everything,
MLB,
every sport.
across the board. Yeah,
I
across
just
the
feel
board.
that it's a travesty that fighters, that athletes put their bodies on the line, work hard every day, run, jog, do this, do that, and the other, and then end up with nothing. How does that work? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
How does that
absolutely.
work?
Absolutely. So we have an app. Eventually, we might have a fund and all these other extensions to service these fighters and make sure that the fighters are safe, starting
Exactly.
with fighting and moving into other sports.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Perfect. Um, Who else is involved? I mean, is there any other players in the game that are interested in getting involved?
Well, look, at the moment, right now, the only people involved right now are myself, my mentor Sid, Mauricio Suleiman, obviously the WBC team, and then obviously, you know, down the line, we look to get the support of His Excellency Turkey Sheikh and all them sort of guys. So we're going to see what's going to happen. Obviously, all of the players are going to get involved here. We're looking to get Eddie Hearn involved, Frank Warren, all the promoters on board, because the promoters are the ones who are going to be able to advise the fighters that it's best that they do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is going to be a great start to your career. This is the guidance. This is what we expect from you to do. You know what I mean? Like, we're basically going to be telling them that this is what you need to do, because we don't want to see fighters end up with nothing.
Yeah.
I don't want to see anybody end up with nothing. You know what I mean? When a
A
fighter,
travesty.
when a fighter puts his body on the line and then leaves the sport of boxing with nothing, man, that's sad. That's sad. And I can tell you this: the WBC is servicing so many of the former greats. I mean, like, the WBC cares is looking after so many fighters, and paying so many bills, and I can honestly say that when I got sick with cancer, Mauricio Suleiman actually reached out to me and said, "What can we do to help?" And I said, "Nothing, just your prayers." And he's like, "No, like financially." I'm like, "No, you must think I'm broke. I'm not like that. You know what I mean? I'm not, I'm not that guy. You know what I mean? I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna call you and say, 'Oh, Mauricio, I need you to pay my bills.'" He's like, "No, because we have things in place that look after fighters that who are going through hardship." And I said, "No, I'm not going through any hardship. I got family. I got brothers. I got my dad, my mum. I got my siblings. I'm good." You know what I mean?
Australia's a blessed country too.
It is. It definitely is.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I had the WBO president on here last,
Yeah.
in our last segment, I believe, and they're also looking at working on. They actually last week launched a ton of programs for fighters
Yeah.
and helping fighters and so on. So we're starting to see some of these promotions,
Yeah.
some of these sanctioning bodies looking deeper into helping. And from my understanding, they have been also helping fighters. I just don't know how
Yeah,
much.
I'm sure they. I'm sure they all are. Of course,
Yeah.
you got to think about it like this, right? You got somebody like Miguel Cotto, who's been a legend of the sport of boxing, who held the WBO title in several different weight divisions. If he goes through some sort of hardship where he's not, Miguel Cotto is doing extremely well. God bless him. He's a great guy. But let's just say he was. Do you think that the WBO would not feel some sort of in debt to this man?
Yeah, for sure.
That we need to give this man back something for what he gave us?
Mhm.
Of course
100%.
they would. Of course they would. That would be
100%.
only right. It's only right from the from the sanctioning bodies to look after the fighters who gave them so much, who held that championship with so much honor and pride.
Absolutely. Okay, there you go. Well, let's segue into modern day boxing,
Yes.
fighting side. We've seen last weekend, we saw, was it last weekend? Yeah. Last weekend?
Inouye was last weekend. The week.
We seen Inoue, we seen Alvarez, Canelo Alvarez, we seen the Times Square event 3 days straight. Probably
Yes.
never happened in boxing history.
Yeah.
Many of the fans were disappointed until the Inoue fight in Vegas.
Yeah. Yes.
And many labeled him as the man who saved boxing that weekend. Why are we seeing this, Billy? I mean, you sort of touched on it before in regards to fighters just getting through to the next paycheck. But I mean, wouldn't you want to fight harder if you know that this man's paying you this much to be like in the middle of Times Square, literally? That's never happened in history.
Well, let me tell you.
And the whole world
First-
talking about you.
First and foremost, my opinion on the Times Square show was that it was an amazing, well put together thought.
Yeah.
I don't
Idea.
think the atmosphere was what, to me, it seemed like a COVID atmosphere. That's what it felt like. You remember when they used to do their
Yeah.
boxing events and they were like a COVID event?
Yeah.
And like hardly any people there. I know there was a lot of people in the streets and stuff like that, but let's be honest. Fighters, when there's a big crowd in the arena and they're screaming and they're shouting, that sometimes motivates you to fight harder. I
Gets
know
over
this
the
because
line.
I was
Yeah.
that person once upon a time.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, that's one of the factors right there, is that the atmosphere was not right. It just wasn't right. The other thing is that when you got people like Ryan Garcia already talking about fighting people like Devin Haney, and Devin Haney already talking about fighting people like Ryan Garcia in a rematch, and they've already agreed on terms and the money and everything like that, what's the mindset that that fight is going into the ring with? All I got to do is come through this fight to have that big fight again and to earn that big money.
Yeah.
They're not going to listen, Devin Haney, that was atrocious. That was absolutely atrocious. Honestly, that wasn't entertaining in any way. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure what happened to Devin, because Devin's not usually like that. He's a lot more of a entertainer. He's a much better fighter. He's a lot slicker, a lot faster. He puts the combinations together. I didn't expect that from him. And then with Ryan, I'm going to cut him a bit of slack because I don't think Ryan's too well, to be honest with you. I don't think he's well mentally. I think he's going through a lot of things. I think he's dealing with a lot. And for a young guy to be going through that kind of adversity at such a young age, it's not healthy, you know what I mean? The last thing I want to hear is that Ryan Garcia has taken his own life or done something to himself. And that's, when you see what's happening with Ryan, that sort of makes you feel that way, you know. It makes you feel like, man, I hope this guy doesn't do anything silly to himself, you know. And so I just feel the only person that really turned up on that night and gave it a really good effort was Tiafimo. He tried to entertain. He tried to put combinations together. He tried to win in good fashion. But the other guys, like the main guys, who was Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney, I'm not sure what I was seeing there. And then the other thing is, in Saudi Arabia, I was there and I watched Canelo fight against Skull. Canelo tried, but Skull just ran all night. And when you're giving a guy like that $3 million purse, who's probably never seen $3 in his whole life, and all of a sudden now he's earning $3 million, right? And all he's thinking is, all I want to do is survive. Let me tell you, you know what I would do to fighters like that? I would put a clause in place that if you're going to run, you're going to get deductions. If you're not going to, like, I remember sitting ringside and Mauricio Suleiman was telling the referee, you got to get him to fight. And he's like, I'm trying.
Where?
You got to get him to fight in the ring.
In Saudi?
Yes. Mauricio was telling the referee they have to engage. And I said to Mauricio, is the referee allowed to tell the fighter that they must engage? He goes, absolutely.
Wow.
You have to, so that referee, poor thing, he was telling Skull, man, you got to throw punches. You got to fight, man. And the other thing is that, like, how can Skull even think that he won that fight? How can he even think that it was close?
Optimistic.
No, listen, it's simple. If you want to win a boxing fight, you got to throw punches. You got to impose your will on this guy. You got to impose your will, your skill. You got to show him who the boss is. He did not show Canelo who the boss is. When you got Canelo backing up and standing in the center of the ring because this guy keeps running, look, Canelo could have did a better job of trying to cut the ring off and all that stuff, but still, man, like, you want to seek a competitive fight. I could tell you one thing. I know Terence Crawford's not going to turn up and fight Canelo Alvarez that way. So you can pay them guys whatever you're going to pay them, but they're going to turn up and fight. You're going to get a great fight. You're going to get a showcase. You're going to get something that's going to put boxing on the map. But Skull and Devin Haney and all of the, oh man, that was just, I can't believe the weekend of boxing. Thank God for Inoue, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you know what, Billy?
The weekend.
Billy, if you look back at the press conferences and their demeanor and attitude, that's what it was. Look, Haney wasn't interested. He looked like he wasn't interested. Ryan was on and off. And that sort of went through into the actual fight itself. People tried to engage Haney in conversation. People tried to get him going. His dad does all the talking. So it's, if really, once you look back at it, you sort of understand and say, that was their demeanor all the way through, really.
Look, when you're paying these kids that kind of money, and I can assure you right now, these kids are getting paid ridiculous amounts of money. Like, I'm talking, they're getting paid the kind of money that will change 20 families' lives in Australia. You know
Wow.
what I mean? Or 20 families' lives in Palestine, or you know what I mean? Like I'm talking about people who are doing it tough. Obviously, if you live in Australia, you're not doing it too tough. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of people out there who aren't doing too well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see how things move forward. I mean,
Look, Turkey
because
O'Shake has done one thing. He's made sure that the big fights happen.
yeah.
That's the one thing that he's done. We've got to give him credit for that. Turkey O'Shake is doing a tremendous job in making sure the big fights happen. And how is he being able to do that? With an open checkbook.
So
But the fighters are now, fighting with no heart, man. They're fighting with no soul. All they're interested in is collecting that dough, man.
so they're playing the system.
That's all it is.
So Billy, has he been good for the sport so far?
I would say, in regards to making the big fights. Well, hold on, listen. Let me tell you something. Let's talk about Eubank versus Conor Benn.
Because let me ask you why. Let me tell you why.
Yeah.
There's a lot of critics out there who are saying he's ruined the sport.
No. If it wasn't for him,
Why?
we wouldn't have got these fights because they would have never happened. They would have never eventuated.
But you said something earlier too.
No, I'll tell you why he's good. Because this is the reason why he's good. What he's done is made all the promoters unite. Well, you got now De La Hoya willing to work with Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn willing to work with Frank Warren. Frank Warren, they're all working with each other now. So all of a sudden now boxing is working hand in hand. Where before, the greatest thing that Turkey O'Shake did was say, oh, okay, you know what, I'm bringing out this new thing called TKO belt and whatever. And
TKO boxing.
With Dana White and all this sort of business. That all of a sudden now made the promoters think, okay, we've got to work together. It made the sanctioning bodies think, we've got to work together.
It's funny, Oscar De La Hoya today announced Golden Boy and Premier Boxing working together.
There you go.
Today. And Jake Paul and Oscar are working together.
There you go. When would that have ever happened without Turkey O'Shake?
It wouldn't. But that's why I said to you, has he been good? Has he been bad? Because there's two arguments. And I like to present both. There's no bias with me. No one's paying me. I don't need no one to pay me. So basically, the conversation online is after last weekend, people were very critical. Not last weekend, the weekend before. The three shows. The one thing I took away from that weekend is that boxing without a crowd is just not the same.
No.
It took us back to COVID days, as you said.
Exactly. No,
it's like a sparring session. And I think
that was one of the problems. I promise you that was one of the issues.
And I think that's what got to Ryan Garcia, because he needs that crowd. He needs that motivation.
Maybe.
He needs the moment. He needs the lights. He needs that enthusiasm.
Listen, let's give credit where credit is due. Remember Rolly. What's his name? Romero.
Rolly
Romero. He was a big factor in that. He basically shut King Ryan down, man. Once he hit him with that left hook, Ryan all of a sudden became very cautious and thought, you know what, I don't want to get clipped, man.
Yeah.
So you got to give him credit for that too.
Very true. So overall, what would you give the sport right now out of 10? As a status, like
look, I'm gonna be as harsh as I can, but I'm gonna say probably like a 7 in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Look, let's be honest. We're getting the big fights, man. We're definitely getting in the big fights. The fact that we're seeing Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford soon, that's a massive fight, man. That's a throwback kind of fight, And I really rate Terence Crawford, man. In my opinion, he's one of the best fighters of all times.
Wow.
Not of this time, of all times. You know what I mean? I reckon he could have been competitive enough against anybody. Look at him, man. The guy's a undisputed world champion in multiple divisions. I think he's got the ability to beat Canelo Alvarez if he fights an A+ fight. I feel like he can beat him.
Billy, do you think people were also very disappointed because we came off the Eubank and Ben fight?
100%. 100%. How can you have a fight where both fighters, from my understanding, like both together, did they throw close to 1,200 punches each? Is that what I heard?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
Okay, so you got, let's just say they did. You got 2,400 punches in a 12-round fight, okay? When the Devin Haney fought, I think there was like a total of 200 punches in the whole fight.
Just under 300, yeah.
There you go. There you go. So how can you compare? Obviously, listen, they're amazing rivalries. The English always put on amazing rivalries. Okay, I've never seen rivalries like the English rivalries. There's been some amazing rivalries that have happened in the English side of the world. So, obviously, it's going to be hard to compete with that. It's going to be very hard to compete.
Is Britain the number one destination of boxing right now?
I would definitely say that they are number one at the moment. I think they're the ones who are generating. Like, look at the gate that they generated for that fight. Look at the gate. Look at the atmosphere. Look at the the attention it drew. Look at Conor Benn, man. I'll be honest. Look, I rate Conor Benn and I rate Chris Eubank, but let's be honest, they're not the most technically savvy fighters.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are just What I loved about this build up to that fight was that it was about legacy.
Mm-hmm.
It was about the fathers. It was about showing the world that who the best is, which family is the best. And when you have a rivalry like that, and when you have two guys that are in the ring representing their fathers, and both their fathers are there at the venue, man, I don't think we'll ever see something like that ever again.
That weekend, I believe they said it generated something close to, this is a pretty crazy number, 20.3 billion impressions in 48 hours online.
Wow.
That was reported by the Ring magazine.
Wow.
And so that's the sort of, people were saying, why is it pay-per-view in the US? Why this? Because that's why. It was a crazy fight.
Man, that was a fight
viral.
that, you'd rather pay for that than pay for both the fights that happened on the weekend. You know what I mean? They gave you an all action-packed fight. They actually put it on the line. I've got to give credit where credit is due, man. Listen, Conor Benn, Chris Eubank, I applaud both of them, man. They were absolute phenoms that night. And both of them grew in stature after that fight. Didn't matter if you lost or had a draw or what. It didn't matter who lost that fight. Both of them are still stars. They're even bigger stars today than they were then.
Absolutely. Billy, last one from me. The TV networks have dropped off, but the zone's taken over the sport.
Yeah.
What do you think of the movement of the zone into pretty much taking boxership under its wing and going with it? We're seeing in Australia, the zone bought out Foxtel. So we're hearing by the start of next year, things will look very, very differently. What are your thoughts?
Well, I can tell you now, what that's going to do is that's going to basically take No Limit out of power. You know what I mean? They're not going to be in the driver's seat as they are at the moment. You know what I mean? It's the zone's going to open up the platform for other promoters to get some TV shows and all. The truth is that No Limit were holding, the TV networks to ransom through two people, just Nikita Zoo and Tim Zoo. You know what I mean? And if the boys aren't winning, then there's no TV days. You know what I mean? That's the truth. You know what I mean? So I just feel that the zone coming in now is going to open up the platform for more promoters to get involved, to get more TV dates, to give other fighters opportunities. Because if you're not a No Limit fighter, you're not basically getting the chance to fight on TV, unless, of course, you're Jai Opataya and some of these guys, Justice Hooney. But I feel there's a lot of great talent in Australian boxing, and I feel that the zone coming in is only going to be good for boxing Australia.
One last one. I know I said the last one. Who is for you the number one fighter in Australia right at this second?
Hands down, I would say the best fighter in Australia is Jai Opataya.
Wow. I second that.
I look, there's a lot of great talent in Australian boxing. So much talent. You know what I mean? There's Justice Hooney. You got the Zoo brothers. There's the Maloney brothers and all that. But let's be honest. When it comes to the world stage, nobody is dominating like
Jai
Opataya is. And I feel that Jai, we haven't even seen the best of him yet. I think the best is yet to come. And I feel that he's motivated, he's driven, he's got a young family, he's hungry. And I'll tell you something, the other thing that people might not know is that Turkey Sheikh absolutely loves him. Loves him, man. Yeah, he loves Jai. He loves his style. He loves how flamboyant he is. He loves how confident he is. He loves the show that he puts on. He's a complete package, man. I feel like, right now, obviously, I would say Jai is number one, and then you got maybe Tim underneath him. But if Tim doesn't do something special against Fandora in this rematch, he's going to plummet right down.
What are his chances?
If I was Tim's team, I would have never took that fight, but that's just my opinion. But I'm not picking against him because Tim's proven me wrong against I never thought that the fight against Jeff Horn was a good idea, but I picked against him and he proved me wrong. And I said from that day, I said I'll never pick against him again. But I don't feel that Tim has had the right sort of comeback fight to get there. I feel like Joey
The
Spence
guidance
was
back, yeah.
Yeah, look, Joey Spence was, he was like, in my opinion, he was handpicked. He was the right guy to put in front of Tim. That's just my opinion. We're all entitled to our own opinion, of course. And I feel that, coming off the loss to Fandora, then Bakram, and that devastating loss to Bakram, that's a major, major blow, man. And I don't know if Tim has been able to, tuck away them demons from that loss. I'm not sure if the fight against Joey Spence was enough for him to be able to work that out. I don't think that Joey Spence presented anything like what Fandora is going to present. And unless Tim gets some amazing, amazing sparring, Fandora is going to be a very difficult guy to beat, man.
Oh, wow. Interesting times, my man. All right, Billy, you've been very, very generous with your time. And obviously, we thank you and appreciate you for taking the time to join us. Any parting words for us?
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and I really appreciate all the love and support that I'm getting from Australian boxing. And I wish each and every fighter out there all the very best, and I hope that each and every one of them gets what they want out of the sport of boxing.
Ladies and gentlemen, former world champion Billy the Kid Dib.